We've just been told there's an attack at the front of the breakaway group. The man to look out for, Marco Pantani.
And he has flown away. There he is, the third man here, and he never waits for anybody on the slopes. He's going straight past Tony Rominger, who, I wonder who, has just arrived and gone by. This man is such a class above everybody else on the mountains.
And look at that there. Tony Rominger looked across to see if he could just accelerate a little bit to stay with Marco Pantani, but Pantani just dances on the pedals and goes away and opens the gap straight away. This man has got to be, as you said a couple of days ago, the best climber in the world.
And the surprising thing is, Paul, remember what he said about 7 days ago, this Tour de France is not over and I will be on the finish podium in Paris. Well, if he intends to be on the finish podium in Paris, he has to attack early and on every day he is in the mountains to recoup his lost time.
He's already caught the two leaders. That were 27 seconds just a few moments ago. He came up to them in the space of 1 kilometre. Straight away, Jean-Cyril Robin from the Festina squad has been dropped, and now Martin Den Bakker has got to try and hold on for as long as he can. But you know, the speed with which Marco Pantani goes uphill, I'm sure we're looking at 14, 15 miles an hour uphill on a slope like this, is very difficult to stay in contact with.
Paul, Marco Pantani is one of the best climbers to come along in years, certainly the best in the last 10. He's #1 in a classification for the best young riders, those 25 and under. And after yesterday's fantastic performance, Lance Armstrong jumps into the top 5. He's at #4 now. At age 23, today's stage marks the longest he has ever stayed in the Tour. Riders' position here, a direct result of where they stand in the Tour overall. Back on the road, things really opening up.
This race all of a sudden has become so much alive. The main field is exploding into little pieces on this climb.
Amazing to know. You know, the last 2 years they've said Miguel Indurain is vulnerable in the mountains, but nobody has dared to attack him. But this year they've realized that, and they've got the courage to go out there and try to do it. It's amazing the pressure that's been put on Indurain, but Tony Rominger now is trying to pull himself back up. You know, this morning Rominger was 8 minutes 56 seconds behind Miguel Indurain in the overall standings, but still Indurain sits back behind his teammates, lets them do the work to limit his losses.
He's waiting till he really does have to use his immense strength. The Benesto boys are going to have a hard day now. The last 2 hours of this race for them is going to be extremely difficult indeed.
But Marco Pantani will make it look easy, Phil. He is so strong for his small size. Fight to go to the finish now. This is Marco Pantani's turf. Nothing but mountain climbing with more than a minute lead on Miguel Indurain.
And so we're heading up towards the summit now of the Col d'Agnès, and this man is still holding on to quite a lead, but chasing him now is the Frenchman who did so well on the climb to Alpe d'Huez, and there he is coming under the kilometre to go and the 25 kilometres from the actual finish line today. And this is Laurent Madouas of the Castorama team. What an improved rider he is in this year's Tour.
Well, he rode an excellent Tour of Italy after he also started his season, his preparation in the Tour du Pont in America. He has come along extremely well, but you know, he made a good move there, and he's starting to close down a little bit on Marco Pantani, but there's still another climb to go.
Well, 45 seconds is the gap at the moment, so you're right, Paul. Madouas is nibbling away, and he's closed a 10 seconds gap to this rider at the moment. And they're adding 3 seconds on here. 48 seconds, they're saying on television. We also are hearing what the race referees are saying out on the course, and so we get time checks from 2 directions.
Another piece of information coming from this group at the moment is, in fact, that Bjarne Riis had to just change a bicycle, and his 2 teammates, Bruno Kengialta and Gabriel Colombo, waited for him and are trying to pace him back into this group at the moment. So that is an unfortunate thing for Riis, because he was riding so well before.
And in fact, just off the camera, though, I could see a rider hanging off the back of this group, and it could well have been one of Riis's teammates. Now, a little bit of good news for Miguel Indurain, if he needs any, is that Vincente Aparicio has rejoined this group after climbing very well on the slope. So he's got a couple of teammates back in that lead group. But this is the man who is blazing the trail today towards Guzet-Neige. He's in some pretty rough weather at the moment as we climb back up again now on the Col d'Agnès, going back up to almost the same height. Hardly any difference at all with that of the Porte de l'Aise, and that's probably why we're back into the rain and low cloud.
Amazing to watch this man pedal on a climb, and you see he really is a typical climber, as the climbers were in the old days of the 50s and 60s. You can see his pedaling style. He rides along for a short while in a small gear, which will be 39, 21, something like that, and then as soon as he slows down, he gets out of the saddle to accelerate and keep his speed up, and that is the advantage that he has over the heavier men who tend to stay sitting down in the saddle and try and stay at one constant rhythm all the time.
And the main chase group now inside that kilometre as well, but Pantani is going to go over the top of this, the winner of another mountain in the King of the Mountains competition. But it's only third category, where the first 6 riders over the top score points for that polka dot jersey. So Richard Virenque will not be too worried about the escape yet. He's making such a tough fight of it, Paul. I mean, he's not really pulling away at all.
But every time somebody has tried to attack behind him, they've closed the gap initially, they've bridged 15 or 20 seconds, they've started to eat into his lead, and then they've cracked and gone back to the main field with Miguel Indurain. And this man rides constantly all the time. Every time he starts to slow down, he gets out of the saddle, he explodes, he lifts his speed a little bit, and then he'll sit down again and ride for another 400 or 500 meters, just about to go over the top of the col. And yes, he'll take maximum points in the King of the Mountains, but that's not what he's looking for. He's looking for time to move up the overall leaderboard.
There's the clock counting down, the time gap for us as we head up towards the summit here with the main chase group. And still the constant rhythm. No panic now. I'm not so sure, in fact, for whether Tony Rominger is here, because I haven't caught a glimpse of him.
Well, he was in great difficulty as soon as Miguel Indurain accelerated on that last climb, the Port de l'Airs. But, you know, he's had an awfully bad time, Tony Rominger, in this year's Tour de France, and I do feel that as some kind of psychological block he has against the Tour de France, or even against Miguel Indurain, because he is a strong rider. He's won the Tour of Spain 3 times. He's won the Tour of Italy, but he just doesn't seem to be able to click in when it comes to the big Tour de France.
And all his victories, of course, have been when Miguel Indurain hasn't taken part, which might well work on him mentally. So a minute gone by now since the passage. 45 seconds, they're saying the gap was to Laurent Madouas, so he's running just about half a minute ahead of this group here as Virenque shoots away to take third place over the climb, and that will give him a good score for the King of the Mountains.
Phil Virenque in the polka dot jersey, but in today's email bag, a question sent to us on the ESPN net concerning the yellow jersey. What is its significance and history in the Tour? Well, even though the first Tour was in 1903, it wasn't until 1919 that this symbol was introduced. The Tour organizing newspaper Le Auto, today's L'Equipe, which means team, was printed on yellow paper. A marketing man suggested the jersey, and now its popularity has increased for 76 years. Thanks for the question. It came out of ESPN Net Sports Zone. More mountain climbing coming up in stage 14 when we return. The edge. Wet roads within inches of the cliff at 55 miles per hour. His whole race is at risk.
It's amazing to watch this man go downhill here. You see, as soon as he gets into a straight, he gets out of the saddle, he accelerates, but he's using all the road that he can to get round these corners. And you know, these corners are very, very slippy, but fortunately the roads in the Pyrenees have a lot of gravel and a very heavy pavement, so he can grip quite well on these corners. But you see, he goes almost to the edge of the road there.
20 kilometres to go now for Pantani. I know one man who would have loved it today, Paul, Greg LeMond. Well, he was a great descender and took many risks.
He did, and that's sure. If he'd been the yellow jersey today, I'm sure he would have tried to get into contact with Marco Pantani on this descent, because he was a good descender and he's been one of the great descenders of the Tour de France. But this man at the front is doing a pretty good job for a non-descender.
The frightening thing when you apply your brakes for these sharp corners, the film of water on the rim of the wheel, it gives you that horrible feeling you actually suddenly accelerate before the brakes actually grip onto the rim, and it always is a little moment for a heart flutter.
Definitely what the riders will do before they come into the corner, they will start to apply their brakes gently for a short period before, just to clear up the water on the rims. Then they realize that it's going to come in and bite at the last minute.
Pantani descending down now. He doesn't descend down a long way. He drops down to about 780 meters, and then he starts the stepping stone climb up to the top of Guzet-Neige. It's in 2 portions. We climb the small Col de la Trappe, and then a very, very short descent of maybe a kilometre, and then he hits the climb up to the finishing line of Guzet-Neige.
Pantani's taking all the risks necessary on this descent at the moment. One thing you must remember, though, when he goes into the corners, he'll be applying a lot more pressure on his front brake rather than on the rear brake, because if you do lock up the back brake, it really is almost impossible in these conditions to correct. You see there, he's not locking his wheels at all. He's slowing down just to the right speed.
Well, this is a look at that chase group that includes Miguel Indurain. Now they're currently behind Pantani by close to 2 minutes. They're continuing to lose time to a very courageous Pantani, who seems to be affected very little by these conditions.
Great shot here of Pantani getting down into his aerodynamic position. It's a very dangerous thing to do because you lose a lot of control on the bicycle, but because he doesn't have the weight of somebody like Indurain, he uses that position to increase his speed in the straight lines on the descent, I hesitate to add.
Well, he's now 10 miles or 16 kilometres from the finish. Let's go back up a notch, and this is Buenajara on the back, sitting onto this group again, which is spreading across the mountain on the descent, and our cameraman will have to stay at the back of it until we start the climb, and therefore we can't exactly work out where Indurain is, but I'm quite sure somewhere up the road with the head of the charge.
Well, Miguel Indurain will be to the front of this group because he himself is an excellent descender, and he will be taking not too many risks, but the speed that he's going down is causing a lot of difficulties for these riders at the back. This is Buenajara. Just in front of him is another Colombian. That'll be Alvaro Mejia. He's trying to stay in contact, but you see the gaps that are being left, and once they get to the bottom, they may well not be able to close those gaps on the climb.
Well, Paul, as the weather conditions decrease, Marco Pantani's performance increases, gets better. He's leaving the rest of the field in a fog. Here's the Tour de France. That man, Miguel Indurain, has been unable to touch that man, Marco Pantani, when he's been in position to win on these mountain climbs.
Now back to the man who's setting the style of the race today, this great climber, Marco Pantani. Remember, he broke clear at the bottom of the Porte de l'Air, and he's been the leader over the top of the mountains ever since. Now he wants to complete a great day by being the first man to the top of Guzet-Neige, and it would be a second stage win for him in this year's Tour de France in the mountains, and then we'd see what sort of time he gains.
Interesting to know that Marco Pantani is one of the few riders who doesn't actually use a heart rate monitor because he doesn't believe in it. He'd rather just ride as hard as he can. He said it's not much point having a heart rate monitor in the mountains. He says because you have to ride over and above your threshold and just give everything you've got.
And this is Aparicio, who's setting the pace for Miguel Indurain now. And Melchior Maurice, the rider on the right, and Alex Zülle, the man on the left. Also in this group is the third placed overall, Laurent Jalabert, and Bjorn Ries. The man who's missing is Tony Rominger. He's now more than 3 minutes behind.
Every time the road steepens a little bit, Pantani gets out of the saddle, he accelerates, he keeps the pace up. He just realizes he's got to keep his speed up for as long as he can. He sits down in the saddle to rest his thighs just a little bit, and then again changes gear and up again. He's really unbelievable, this man. He goes over the top there of the Col de la Trappe, just a slight descent before then he faces the final climb up to the Guzet-Neige.
But here we have Aparicio, followed by Neil Stevens of Australia, an inspired man indeed today. This is what the Once team is like. They inspire one another, and Alex Zülle and co are going to really thank again Neil Stevens tonight. But this is the rider who's riding for himself. Earlier down in the valley, Claudio Chiappucci had a flat back tyre. We've not heard from him since. But now we're looking at the group here containing Laurent Jalabert, Richard Brink, Melchior Maurice to our right, Alex Zülle, Ivan Gotti on the far side in blue. The only man missing from the royalty today is in fact Tony Rominger.
And Tony Rominger at the moment is 4 minutes and 30 seconds behind Marco Pantani, which puts him almost 2 minutes behind this group of Miguel Indurain. Now Pantani's on the descent. You see he's getting as low as he can on that bicycle, trying to get as aerodynamic. He wants to recuperate a little bit on this final descent before the slopes of Guzet-Neige, but he keeps his speed up all the time. At the moment he's probably touching 35 miles an hour on this descent. Before then he has to change his gears from the big gear he's using now right to the opposite end of the scale. Here's the dangerous corner. He's got to take a very sharp left-hander, and in fact he almost misjudged it. He wasn't expecting that, but safely round. He's got about 500 meters downhill now before he starts the climb.
Well, you can see see the rain beginning to build up on the lens there. That means the last and steepest climb will become the most dangerous for Pantani. Marco Pantani, the best young rider on the tour, who won L'Alpe d'Huez last week, is proving he's the best climber on the tour as well. Phil, give us the distance to the finish.
The 5-kilometer point to the finishing line, and Marco Pantani being chased here by Laurent Madouas, and Madouas has been chasing him, in fact, since the previous climb where he attacked on the Col d'Agnès, and it was on that climb where Pantani consolidated his lead. Madouas went over the top there second, 45 seconds back. Richard Virenque bringing over Miguel Indurain and his teammate Aparicio, and the news on that climb was that Tony Rominger had been dropped and was 2 minutes 50 seconds behind. But on the descent, a very, very dangerously wet descent indeed. More problems for the television motorbikes. They crashed in the Alps and they were down again in the Pyrenees. But now we are with the chase group here on the final climb of the day, and once again we're sorry about the picture breakup, but it is the atmospherics in the Pyrenees. They're climbing up towards again more fog, as Aparicio, who rejoined this group after a bit of a chase, is now helping out Miguel Indurain. Just 2 riders ahead of the yellow jersey on the climb.
Well, for the moment, the time is not being pulled back on Marco Pantani. He's actually increasing his lead as he comes up the climb of Guzet-Neige. He's 3 minutes ahead of the yellow jersey group of Miguel Indurain at the moment, and still in the middle there is Laurent Madouas, the Frenchman from the Castorama team, at 1 minute 25. He's doing a superb ride, but he isn't getting anywhere near this man.
Well, Pantani went for a long one today. He was seeking a big time gain. Do you think, Paulie, would he see a 2 minute 30 gain perhaps as a good time gain?
He would be happy. I think it's a lot more than he would have gained if he'd waited until the bottom of the Guzet-Neige climb to launch his attack. If he'd waited till here, he may well have been able to pull 1 minute out of the rest of the group, but attacking so far from the finish, that is why he's able to open his lead up. But you know, I'm sure he will do it again in a couple of days' time when we go into the big mountains, because that really is his terrain once we go into the high Pyrenees, where we start looking at 2,000 meters.
The riders having a full rest day tomorrow, no travel at all. They stay here in the Pyrenees. They'll all be out on the bikes, of course. And then we have a real tough day up to Cotteret, which is where Miguel Indurain once won a road race stage of the Tour de France. Now Pantani under the 4 kilometers to go banner. Inspiration coming from the crowd. But because the road up to Guzet-Neige was closed for quite a long time, the crowd, in fact, not so thick on Guzet-Neige. Nothing like we would have expected.
It's a difficult area to get to because there's not so many roads, access roads into the Pyrenees, and the tough climbs that are around here are extremely small. But this is the man of today for Miguel Indurain, Vicente Aparicio. He's done an excellent job. He's suffered so much, but these men believe so much in their leader, Miguel Indurain, that they will fight and recover and come back into the group just so that they can help him for every last little bit of energy they have on that day.
And although it seemed on the Port de l'Air that Indurain was going to be in for a really tough session today, he's calmed the whole thing down, and it's even an added bonus because they've seen Tony Rominger crack wide open and fall away from this group today. Bjarne Riis is still there. There he is in the red jersey, champion of Denmark. They're under the 5 kilometer to go banner. Richard Virenque is here, Laurent Brochard, and there's Claudio Chiappucci, so he recovered well from that punctured back wheel. Paolo Lanfranchi is the rider from Brasilia.
He's been well to the front over the last couple of days in these mountains, and there's another Marco Pantani supporter letting him know what the gap is, and it is in fact increasing dramatically. 1 minute and 47 seconds, and Bjarne Riis in fact is attacking again from the yellow jersey group.
Well, our camera's staying with the French rider, but news reaching our ears that Bjarne Riis has attacked from that Indurain group, and now we're at the back of that group, and let's have a look. Yes, somebody's certainly gone. Indurain again continues to make the tempo at the front as our cameraman scampers up to see Bjarne Riis on the attack here on the climb of Guzet-Neige.
Well, Bjarne Riis here obviously not attacking Miguel Indurain. What he wants to do is put Laurent Jalabert into difficulty. He saw that Jalabert was dropped on the last climb there, and he may well have changed his bicycle to get a lighter bicycle to go into this final climb, you know, so that he could get away from Laurent Jalabert and move back up into 3rd place in the overall standings. He has to get 2.5 minutes though in the overall overall standings today if he can jump up to third place.
Well, even a slight reduction of the gap and finish it off in the next couple of days perhaps, but look at that acceleration. There's been no reaction whatsoever. Indurain isn't going to start the reaction. Why should he? Because after all, he's 6 minutes ahead of Bjarne Riis, and we're looking at about 3.5 kilometers to the end of this day of racing.
Phil, Marco Pantani's climb is the story of today's race. The others in the Michelin race summary, well, 129 riders took the start for their first day in the Pyrenees. Field stayed together until the mountains in the last 40 miles. Tony Rominger unleashed the first serious attacks, but wasn't able to escape the pressure of Miguel Indurain and the Banesto team. Marco Pantani seemed to have no trouble with that pressure, has attacked, and now 3 miles from the finish, he is 2.5 minutes ahead of the yellow jersey. Now, that should be enough for Marco to win if he can hang on. Back with his finish in just a moment. Pantani on the climb up Guzet-Neige, trying to repeat what he did the other day on Alpe d'Huez.
Back in the mountains, this man has come into his own once again. He's going to steal a little bit of time today. He's being chased still by Laurent Madouas, and then we go back to the people who are racing for third place, led of course by the man in yellow on his 31st birthday, Miguel Indurain. Just behind him we have Alex Zula, and now trying to get on, I think it's Ivan Gotti. Now don't forget that Ivan Gotti started today and just 1 second behind Tony Rominger. Well, those gaps will be minutes tonight because Rominger has been dropped from this group.
Another man who's been dropped from this group as well is Melchior Mauri. He may well have sore legs after their effort yesterday. Let's not forget they were really at the front of the race for an awful long time, and it looks now as if Indurain has decided it's about time to get rid of the dirty washing because he's putting the pressure on, and again, as he did on the last climb, he's blowing everybody away.
But don't forget, and we're not too sure where he is, but somewhere just ahead of Indurain is the champion of Denmark, Bjarne Riis, and that probably is why Indurain has now decided to come after him. So Pantani continues to blaze his own trail up the mountain, chased by Laurent Madouas, then by Bjarne Riis, and then by Miguel. And Miguel still has Azula, the shadow, and he's hanging on once more to the Spaniard. This is Pantani, tapping out the rhythm for the last time today as he looks for now the kite in the sky that will put him in the final kilometre.
Still a superb job over these last 2 climbs. Every time he feels that his speed is slowing down a little bit, he gets out of the saddle to use the gears as best as he can. He puts the bicycle from side to side, getting every little bit out of his body, from his arms, from his legs, from his back, the last little bit of energy just to push him up this mountain.
Jean-Marie Leblanc, a brave man in his shirt sleeves, standing through the roof of the car there, witnessing one of the finest exhibitions of climbing we've seen for a long time. This is the chase behind very briefly, but the picture's breaking up. Now the crowd well under control, and I must say there is quite a large crowd here now. They've come out of the woods and out of their tents. They've had a wet night, those that have stayed up here, but they're seeing a great performance again by Marco Pantani. Slips it up just one little sprocket there to try and continue at the pace. There's Indurain Zula, and they've caught Bjarne Riis. There he is, and he's now just going to hang on. So we've got the 1st, 2nd and 4th place here, and the 6th place, because Gotte, number 17 on the left, he will now be up to 6th place in the Tour de France. He'll have gone over Tony Rominger. 2 kilometres to go for this group.
And only 2 men up in front of them on the road. That is Marco Pantani and Laurent Madouas, who's trying to hold on to 2nd place on the stage, and hopefully, if he can, moving a little higher in the overall standings, because he started in 13th behind Richard Virenque and Claudio Chiappucci. But these 4 men here are the men we've seen so much together in the toughest parts of the Tour de France.
Laurent Madouas on the final hairpin bends of the climb of Guzet-Neige, but he's still not making any progress at all on Marco Pantani, and he may well only just hang on by the chase back being caused by Miguel Indurain. The important thing is that Bjarne Riis is also in that chase group, and Laurent Jalabert isn't, and so Riis closing in on the 3rd place overall in this race today. And that's the sight he wanted to see. 1 kilometre to go for Marco Pantani. Now it gets a little bit easier here, and then it climbs up to the finishing line. We're heading up now to the corner where Robert Miller went the wrong way a few years ago and lost the stage of the Tour de France because of it.
One thing we do have to say, though, that even if Marco Pantani does go the wrong way, he's got enough time in hand to come back on himself and still win the stage.
Yes, so that time with Robert, it was a three-man sprint with Philippe Bouvatier, Massimo Girotto and Miller. Now this time it is just one man and himself, Marco Pantani. Remember Alpe d'Huez, of course, he almost went into where they send the cars to park just before the finishing line, but he turned round and went straight up to the finish at Alpe d'Huez. Very similar thing could happen here, to sharp left into the finish.
Well, I have to admit, we were so lucky in having this man at the Tour de France. He was nearly robbed of his start here, but it's so good to have him.
Yes, an injured knee which kept him out of his home tour, the Tour of Italy. It's meant he's come to the Tour de France quite fresh. He started below form for sure, and he said he wasn't his old magic self, but he's certainly made amends now. He came good in the Alps, and it looks as though he's going to be even better in the Pyrenees. There are still 2 more stages in the Pyrenees to come after the day off tomorrow. The final gear change for Marco Pantani, and he's made the right turn as well. Now he can line up for the finish, and he can collect his second stage in the mountains. He won in the Alps on the revered Alpe d'Huez, and now he will win at Guzet-Neige. A long day in the saddle, almost 4.5 hours, and Pantani still looking so good as he sprints clear. There'll be good time gains for him today as well, as he comes up through the murk to the line to the applause of a very appreciative crowd.